She recently published her first essay collection entitled Soundtrack. Want to hold that up? Liner Notes from a Pandemic Mixtape. Alison lives in Rye with her husband Rich, and they have 3 children, Rob, Eliza, and Ian. Alison earned a master's in museum education from Bank Street College and taught elementary school in Manhattan for a decade. In 2010, after her first child was born, she and her husband started spending summers on Shelter Island, one of her favorite places in the world. Her family moved to Rye in 2014, where she worked at the Rye Historical Society for the past 6 years. Alison has been part of a writing group in Rye for about 7 years. Along with some other local writers, she helped found a literary festival called Watershed. She's also a writer for our local paper called The Rye Record, and she covers arts and culture. Alison loves being part of the writing community here in Shelter Island and has been fortunate to have friends and neighbors here who are writers. Outside of writing, Alison is a founding member of the Pride Community Group, a nonprofit in Rye that collaborates with other LGBTQ+ organizations to support and raise awareness for LGBTQ+ youth and families. As a result of her work in education throughout the community, she was awarded the NAACP's Freedom History Champion Award in October 23. Here we go, Alison.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I should mention, so Paula is one of the women in our writing group in Rye, and also one of the co-founders of the Watershed Literary Festival, which is something we're really proud of, because that's, in addition to writing this book, which I wasn't planning to do going into the pandemic, I also wasn't planning to start a literary festival, but it just sort of happened. People wanted to do stuff outside, and they hadn't seen each other in a long time, and I think there was just a lot of creative energy during that time. And so Paula and I, along with a few other people who had a network of writers who we knew. We had a writer from Shelter Island come, and we just thought this would be a really fun way to celebrate all of the writing that's happening, all the creative work that's happening. So it's every other year in Rye. I hope you'll all come in September on the odd years. So we had one in September 2021. And then September 2023, so the next one's in 2025. So you have some time to get your plans together. But we're always looking for new writers or writers who have just published something. So Watershed is another really fun thing that happened because nothing else was happening for a while. So thank you, Paula Fung, for introducing me and for coming with me from Rye out to Shelter Island. And thank you so much to Jessica and Liz from the Shelter Island Library for having me here as part of the Friday Night Dialogue series. It's kind of a dream come true. I mean, I love this library. My kids spend so much time in this library. Up when the little room upstairs the little area upstairs was the children's room. And my son still spends a lot of time here with the 3D printer over here. So he couldn't believe I was coming here tonight without him, actually, because he loves the Shelter Island Library so much. And it's just such a special place. And so thank you all for coming. And thank you to everyone at the library. And, it's such a wonderful place to support. So thank you. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my book and sort of how it got started. I actually don't need these until I'm reading, so I realized. So I've been writing essays for a long time. I've been writing for a long time. I used to teach writing when I was a teacher. And when everything shut down in March of 2020, I just started writing in a journal every day, which I'm not so great about that as a practice. But my attention span for reading kind of flew out the window. I had a lot of trouble focusing on reading long books. I found I was reading articles and then, and like everybody else, kind of just scrolling and not remembering very much. But I had this really active writing group, and we met once a week, and we switched right to Zoom, and we still met once a week. And on the days in between, I would write in these journals, and I would just kind of jot down anything. And I had these 2 journals that are just filled. There's like all different colors of ink, and just every day I would write stuff and draw little pictures. And
we're not passing those around. Right?
No, pass the journals around. I don't know what's in there, but I did bring some props just to remind me what I wanted to talk about. So I was writing in just little paragraphs here and there, and then when our writing group would come together, I often worked on like something that just kept coming back to me, because I'd go for long walks with the dog, I was writing in my notebooks, and I was listening to a lot of music in my house. And I was just, those were kind of my three things that were, and you know, I had my three kids running around, I had my husband home working, and there was one day every so often where one of my kids would have a trumpet lesson at the same time that another one had home PE, and my husband always had like the conference call or something. There was all this noise in the house, and so it was just a crazy time. And I just found that there were those three things: my long walks, and my writing, and my music, that just sort of helped every day get back into balance, and for me to just feel really good that I was doing things that I enjoyed while also taking care of everybody else. And when I would go out for my walks, there were always these little pieces of my journals or of the day or of conversations that would come that I just kept revisiting. And so those were often the things that then in my writing group, I would try to turn into a longer essay. And a few essays, it started as like the whole lockdown thing. It started as one essay, and then it just kept growing. And we thought it was 2 weeks, and then there was just no end in sight. So I had one essay, and then it kept getting longer. And finally, one of my friends in my writing group said, "I think that feels like 3 distinct essays. You should break it up." And once I had the freedom to sort of break it up, then I found that every few weeks I had another little story that sort of fit in, and all of the stories had some sort of musical component that tied in. So a song that we were listening to, or the first one's about a movie that we watched that had a song that I loved when I was in middle school and high school that I hadn't thought about in a long time. And I find that the combination of just our memories as well as music, those memories become so much more vivid when there's a song that goes with it. And I think we can all think of songs that really mark certain moments in our lives. And so during those couple of years where we all, I think, were experiencing, there weren't so many big things going on, because a lot of the big things in our lives kind of got canceled. But there were a lot of little things going on, and we were paying a lot more attention to those little moments or to the things that we saw along our walks, because we had time to really use observation skills. And so I was paying a lot of attention to how certain songs or how certain music influenced my life over the years, and then how it was shaping my kids' lives. And so that's a lot of what I was writing about. And so so Wendy, who's here, who I'm so happy to have here, her daughter is one of my best friends from college and is really the reason we're on Shelter Island. And she mentioned to me that, I called the book Soundtrack Liner Notes from a Pandemic Mixtape. And even my parents were like, "Oh, we didn't know what liner notes were. We had to look that up." So in an album, in a vinyl record, and then in a CD, and then in a tape, and then in a CD, the liner notes were the copy, the writing that went along with the song. So if there was the name of a song and how long it was and things like that, then there was often a little story about what inspired it, or just a note that the musicians wrote in there to explain that, give a little context to that song. So that's why I called this Liner Notes from a Pandemic Mixtape, because I felt like each chapter has a song title as the name of the essay, but the essays aren't really about the song. They're not musically, they're about how the song influenced our lives or became part of our story. And so that's why I called it Liner Notes, because I felt like it's the context that sort of makes it, that connects the music to our lives during that time. So I'm going to read one of the essays, and it's the essay that connects the most to Shelter Island. And in an essay collection, you can start at the end. It doesn't matter where to start. So I'm going to read the last essay. There's 18 essays that are about, or let me see, there's 20 essays that are about, that took place in chronological order. And when I was done those 20 essays, that's when I felt like I was really done with this book. It was January of 2022, I think. Yeah, January of 2022. And I just felt like, okay, this feels like a complete project. And it feels like it's come together as a book. I have a friend on Shelter Island, my friend Wiley, who's an editor. I worked with her a little bit, and she also thought there was something in there, which was really great and reassuring. And so that was January of 2022. I worked on it for a while, and then summer of 2022, I really felt like, okay, this is done. I want to, see if I can get this published. And then, so after those first 20 essays, I have 2 bonus tracks that I included. And I'm going to read the second bonus track because it's really got a lot to do with Shelter Island and with some people in this room. So, and it's called You Don't Know Me. And there's a little inscription here. Actually, I can show you the actual book because I brought it. So the inscription is from this book, and somewhere in here, I don't know where it is. Well, here, oh, it's so dark you can't even see it. But because I couldn't really read it when I got it. But it says, "Hey Jeff, rock and roll, XO, Danielle," and someone whose name I couldn't read. So it's just signed from some friends to some other friends. So yeah, it says, July 17th, 2003. "Hey Jeff, rock and roll, XO, Danielle, and R." I don't know Jeff or Danielle, and I can't make out the third name in this inscription beyond the R. But I feel incredibly lucky that at some point between July 2003 and late August 2022, Jeff ran out of room on his shelf, although hopefully he continued rocking and rolling. And this book, Nick Hornby's songbook, found its way to me. I loved this book so much that one day when I had to stop reading to go make dinner, I paused before putting it down and found myself smiling and staring at the cover. Although I stopped short of making an outward declaration, the words, "You complete me," did cross my mind. For a spiritual agnostic like me, finding this book at this particular moment I found it made me wonder about the possibility of divine intervention. It was kismet at the very least. You don't find this kind of magic on Amazon. Over the summer of 2022, I took particular delight in the hands-on, low-tech experience of in-person shopping, of going into a store and not knowing what I might find. The pleasure of unknown outcomes stood in stark contrast to the goal orientation and overwhelming choices of online ordering and the COVID-inspired trend of curbside pickup. It's why shopping at a farmer's market is so much better than the grocery store routine. Not everything gets checked off the list, but that one loaf of zucchini bread is worth the extra stop, along with being outside and having conversations with people who love what they do. My favorite store in any small town is the bookstore. The quirkier, the better. Small bookstores have their own personalities and reflect the communities that sustain them. At age 9, my son Ian developed a love of old stuff, and when he goes into a secondhand store, he investigates each item as if it is sunken treasure he pulled from the bottom of the sea. He knows he's not allowed to take the whole chest of jewels home, and he's trying to find the one he will value the most and whose actual value fits within his small spending allowance. It's the same feeling I have at independent bookstores. And in stores that sell used books and records, I get even more absorbed. Here, each item contains not only the written story or song list, but also the story of the person who touched it, bought it, read it, or listened to it, then parted ways with it and gave it another life. When my kids were little, I passed Black Cat books almost daily on our summer vacations on Shelter Island. But I was so busy parenting that I rarely found the time to go inside and look around. The store occupies a shingled two-story house set back from the main road with a little gravel parking lot out front. Its sign, no surprise, is a black cat, and there's always a shelf of marked-down books outside the entrance. A short distance from the bank, the post office, and the island's only grocery store, Black Cat is a prime location, but it is so unassuming that one could drive by many times with no idea of the possibilities within its walls. Around 2016, I bought a record player, and we started collecting vinyl. My friend Matthew mentioned that they have records at Black Cat too, and my kids and I were thrilled to find they also have a wide range of children's books, perfect for summer reading. We started visiting regularly to look through the shelves, flip through the records, and sometimes trade in old books for credit towards new ones. I found time to stop by on my own too, looking for inspiration or to shop for a gift. A friend of mine pointed out that the beauty of used bookstores is that the merchandising doesn't influence your choices the same way it does in the dwindling number of big box stores or even independent bookstores. Publishers can't push big displays of the hottest summer read if the store doesn't sell new books. In theory, this could make it harder to discern what might be good or not, but in practice, I often find books I love. On a quiet August day in the summer of 2022, my friend Emily and I took our sons to Black Cat Books. The familiar shelves of children's books are just inside the entrance, opposite a staircase leading to the second floor. Most of the store's collection is on the first floor, with fiction and nonfiction in the front room on floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and center tables. The records are neatly organized by genre in bins under the windows, and a couch creates an inviting reading nook right in the middle of everything. Art, design, and rare books fill the shelves towards the back of the store where Michael, the owner, who works at the register, the windows around him giving a glimpse of the backyard, perfect for reading. Much of Black Cat's business is online sales of rare books, and Michael's often multitasking between wrapping those books for shipment while making recommendations and small talk with his in-person customers. He never tries to sell me anything, yet something about the place makes me want to buy nearly everything. That summer, Ian got into manga, the Japanese comics and graphic novels that have recently become widely popular among American kids. We asked Michael if he had any manga, and of course the answer was yes, upstairs in the room next to the office. In all these years, I had never been upstairs. The arrow leading upstairs says music books, and for some reason, rather than realizing this could be the perfect combination of my two favorite things, I must have thought it was books of sheet music. I'm not a musician, and I never climbed the short flight to find out. Up we went, the boys leading the way. As they sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the manga and other graphic novels, I stood in the hall scanning the shelves of music books, biographies of musicians, books by musicians, and countless books on music history and criticism covering all genres. I found one called The Rap Yearbook, the most important rap songs from every year since 1979, discussed, debated, and deconstructed. And I held it close under one arm. It was the perfect belated birthday present for my 14-year-old Rob. Right at eye level, I saw a small hardcover, the scrawl on its spine reminiscent of teen handwriting, Nick Hornby, Songbook. Pulling it from the shelf, I felt an immediate connection to it. I opened it and saw the inscription to Jeff and the CD inside the back cover. A lot changes in 2 decades. How would I listen to this CD, I thought. The cover had song titles scribbled on it and a couple drawings of little characters, along with coffee mug rings, whose origin was difficult to trace. Was it part of the design, or had Jeff placed his coffee on it one day? I had read a bunch of Nick Hornby books in my 20s. I loved them. I loved him. I loved the movies they became. When Rich and I first started, Rich is my husband, when Rich and I first met, we sized each other up in a flirtatious manner by answering the famous high-fidelity question, top 5 albums of all time. Rich was decisive with Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd's The Wall, and Bob Marley on his list. Mine included The Velvet Underground, Sinead O'Connor, and probably The Queen is Dead by the Smiths. I think we found common ground with U2's The Joshua Tree. I remember not being able to narrow down to fill that 5th slot, wanting to leave room for the future. I was only 25 after all. But I had never come across Songbook at Black Cat or elsewhere. It wasn't downstairs in the fiction or memoir sections where High Fidelity, Fever Pitch, and About a Boy were sitting, ready to be reborn. It was nestled up here among the music books, because it is a book about 31 songs that influenced Hornby's life and writing. The book paints a self-portrait, mosaic-like, with various beautiful fragments from other artists. I had never seen anything like Songbook, except that I had, and the many drafts of a manuscript I had spent the past 2 years writing. I tried to be present with Ian and our friends as I walked back to the manga section with this secret talisman tucked under my arm. I couldn't believe the book had left Jeff's home and withstood the curiosity of the other customers, so that it was sitting here waiting for me, bringing a sprinkle of enchantment to an otherwise typical summer day. Songbook came to me at a pivotal moment. I had recently completed the manuscript for this book. After editing, rereading, and sharing it with a few friends, the project finally felt finished. I wanted it published, polished, completed, bound, but didn't know how best to make this happen. So before heading out to Shelter Island, I printed a copy at Staples and mailed it to my 102-year-old grandmother, then wrote a cover letter and emailed it off to an editor. In that moment of vulnerability, waiting to hear back, I began to wonder why I had worked so hard on this book for so long. It had started as a few journal entries in March 2020 when the pandemic began, and as COVID lingered on, the essays just kept growing. What if no one likes it? What if I wasted 2 years? What if it just isn't good? Then I found Songbook, and it all made sense. I felt compelled to write the essays in this book as the events around me unfolded. Digging into history and pieces of my past had helped me gain perspective on the frightening, precarious present. I worked and reworked the essays because I cared about them and wanted to practice the craft of writing. Hopefully my kids and the rest of my family would one day read the book. If a few hundred other people did too, that would mean the world to me. Nick Hornby didn't write Songbook to be a huge commercial success or to sell the film rights. He wrote it because it mattered to him. And now it mattered to me, more than he could have imagined, probably more than it had mattered to Jeff, but who knows? Maybe Jeff had a moment like this and outgrew it, creating the possibility for me to savor it now. Nick Hornby was 44 and a father of 2 kids when he started writing Songbook in 2001. I was 43 when I started writing my book and 45 when I finished. When I read all those Hornby books in my 20s, before marriage and kids and life, I drank them in, but may not have fully appreciated the complexities. In Songbook, I understood Hornby and his writing in a new way. I had a solo bus ride to read the last half and a night alone in my house to listen to tracks from the book, on YouTube rather than on the CD. I'd forgotten how much I liked Ben Folds 5 back in 98 in his essay, Hornby describes their amusing song Kate so perfectly. A teenager's crush progresses from an infatuation with the multi-talented Kate to realizing she sleeps and breathes like everyone else. I remembered that Ben Folds, now performing solo, was coming to the Capitol Theater in the next town over sometime soon. Help me, Google, when? August 31st, 5 days away, tickets still available. Before I knew what was happening, I was dancing in my living room. For the next few days, I carried the book with me everywhere like a security blanket, a reminder that this feeling of connection is why we write. It's why we read. It's what makes bookstores magical and music viscerally memorable. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. The next week, I took Ian and his friend to the Ben Folds concert. We listened to a recent set list to prepare, and I was struck by the humor and accessibility of the songs. Ian especially loved Effington and Rock This Bitch, for obvious reasons. The music was so engaging, it was hard to believe it was a lone person up there with only a piano and a microphone. Between songs, Ben Folds was funny and endearing, and he even invited audience participation on the hit song, You Don't Know Me, giving us the responsibility of singing Regina Spektor's part. He played Kate, he played Army, and he played a bunch of other songs I hadn't known and now love, all because Jeff decided he was done with Songbook. But I wasn't quite done. It felt like Michael at Black Cat should know what he'd given me, this spell of a just right book at a just right moment. Back on Shelter Island for Labor Day weekend, I dropped Ian and Eliza at the library, and for possibly the first time in my history of book buying, I went back to the bookstore to say, thank you very much for this book. I love it. My thank you to Michael led down another path of overlapping friends, shared musical interests, and a lively conversation with another customer, Tom. who happened to be hosting a discussion about music at the library that evening. I would soon realize that, though I had never met him before, Tom was already a piece of my story. But we didn't know that yet, as the three of us stood talking. I explained why Hornby's book meant so much to me, because I'd been writing a bunch of essays as a soundtrack. And I used to assume a lot of people organize their lives according to music, and who knows if they do or they don't, but Nick Hornby does. And for that, I was grateful. I think I used the word validating, and I meant it. Tom and Michael know a lot about literature, music, and writing, and if I ever host a podcast, like the BBC's Desert Island Discs, I'll definitely interview them. We talked about famous rock stars and Shelter Island musicians. We talked about small venues, outdoor venues, CBGBs, and the first Lollapalooza. We talked until a family came up to the register, not wanting to interrupt, but hoping to actually purchase some books. The dad approached the counter and put his pile of books down, with About a Boy right on top. Nick Hornby again. Call it coincidence, a small world, magic, or fate. Or maybe just call it a bookstore. That's the end.